This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 10 is the time. I am not by any stretch of the imagination making light of this story, but there is a line in the coverage of the escape from Wandsworth prison of Daniel Khalif that it becomes close to begging belief. It doesn't exactly sound like Moriarty, this bloke. In January this year, he was arrested again after a fake bomb was allegedly discovered on his desk. And not even under his desk, but on his desk. And yet the mode of escape yesterday does suggest perhaps a slightly higher level of criminal enterprise than some of the offences that he was jailed for would otherwise attest. The 21-year-old was wearing a chef's uniform of red and white checkered trousers because he'd been working in the prison kitchens. I bet he was wearing Crocs. They always wear Crocs in kitchens as well, don't they? And escaped, apparently, by clinging on to the bottom of a van that had been delivering food into the grounds of the South London prison. I've got a couple of thoughts on my mind this morning. I won't detain you unduly with the first one. But we only talk about prisons when someone escapes, or when some prisoners end up on the roof, or possibly when prison officers go on strike. It's a mad illustration of how the media works and the relationship between the media and public interest / public opinion, isn't it? I mean, it's inevitable. This isn't even a criticism. But just use this today as an illustration of how agendas are set. This is such a... I know this is sounding a bit odd, but bear with me. This is such a perfect illustration of the relationship between media, politics and public. We wouldn't know. I mean, how many people are in prison at the moment? You have to know when a prisoner escapes, especially this one, because we've been told not to approach him if you see him. But how bad are staffing issues at Wandsworth Prison, for example? I saw one politician this morning being asked how come they could have only a third of people turning up for their shift at Wandsworth not that long ago. Did you know about that? You didn't know about that. I haven't talked about that. That's the kind of thing I should probably be talking about. I don't know about that because it's not being reported anywhere else. So unless it's being reported somewhere else, you're not aware of the problem. And you're only aware of the problem because a much, much bigger problem, i.e. an escaped prisoner, is being reported. Imagine if, I think of small boats. Think of the interest that the public is being ordered to have in the small boats issue, despite the numbers in the great scheme of things being relatively negligible. But the Conservative Party are talking about it all the time. So it takes up the bandwidth in your head. In the run-up to the European Union referendum, all of the front pages about immigration were making people get very scared and angry and racist. And yet, as soon as the victory was achieved and all of the front pages diminished, despite the fact, of course, that the numbers didn't. The numbers rose, effectively, or are now higher than they were then, but you're not getting the front pages about it, so your Auntie Doris and Uncle Keith aren't using their Facebook page to spread all sorts of racist propaganda. It's very weird. I know probably some of them are, obviously, because of the small boat stuff, and Farage is still out there rubbing his thighs down in Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars, but you get my point. It's mad, right? That we're so sheep-like, really. We are all seagulls, ultimately, even those of us who like to think occasionally that we might be trawlers. We are all seagulls following the trawlers of news in the hope of feasting on some of the fish that fall off the back of the boat. It is a... what's the word I'm looking for? It is a... It's almost certainly a lens through which we're going to look at bigger stories, okay? If there is any breaking news regarding Daniel Abed Khalif, who police believe may be trying to leave the country, again, I don't know what that's based on, except the fact that he's just escaped from prison. He's probably trying to leave the country. But if there is any breaking news on this in the course of the morning, we will, of course, bring it to you imminently. Let me give you some updates, like a proper radio presenter / journalist. Doesn't happen very often, but currently the M20 between Junctions 8 and Junction 9 is closed due to enhanced port security checks. The M20 coastbound carriageway between Junctions 8 and 9 is being temporarily closed due to delays caused by these checks. It will allow freight bound for the continent to queue on the empty section of motorway in order to keep any disruption to Kent's wider road network to a a minimum. All EU-bound freight must use the M20. Other traffic must follow the signed diversion. So that's in place now on the already fairly beleaguered M20, and so it continues. But what I want to do, as I say, is use it as a lens through which to examine a broader issue. What's it like in our prisons? Are these stories about staffing crises correct? I think it might be one of those days by which the plural of anecdote is briefly data. If you work in a prison or you have recently been in a prison, ideally Wandsworth prison, but any other prison will do, I just want you to call me and talk me through what's going on. And also, here's the question for people who haven't been to prison or worked in a prison, which is, as usual on this programme, confining my callers to far too small a constituency. Why do we only talk about prisons when someone escapes? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I want to expand slightly on that second question. Why aren't prisons more politically pertinent? You really have Tories queuing up to compete about who can be cruelest about convicts, which, most of us don't struggle with as much as we do about their competition to be cruelest about disabled people or people on sickness benefits. But it's pretty obvious, almost all of the data supports the notion that if you look after prisoners much better than we currently do, if you prioritise rehabilitation over encouraging recidivism, then you reduce enormously the likelihood of reoffending. Illiteracy and childhood trauma, being victims of child abuse. The statistical disproportionality of people in those categories is absolutely off the charts. People who can't read or write, people who've had very dysfunctional or traumatic childhoods, the likelihood of them ending up in prison is absolutely off the charts compared to people who've had happier youths and happier formative years. And yet what do the Tories do constantly? And Labour isn't much better in my lifetime, in my memory. I don't think it is. I could be wrong. The priority is put on just punishing. And then you get your usual right-wing dinosaurs queuing up to talk about, well, prison's like a holiday camp, really, which means you've been to neither a prison nor a holiday camp for the last 50 years. But somehow, once again, though, those appetites for outrage and performative cruelty are always going to be fed. So that intrigues me. Why do you think that prisons are not... So this is a conversation we should have on a day when there's no prison-related news, on a day when there's no prison escape. Why don't prisons feature more? What is the role of prisons in politics? In America, it is actually true in some states that the private companies running prisons receive guarantees from the county or the state about how many people will be imprisoned so that they can guarantee their income stream. So they get money per prisoner. Their private sector companies, opening a prison in a state is generally considered, or in a county is generally considered to be a win because it provides jobs and economic boosts. So in order to encourage private prison companies to open prisons in your town, you guarantee them a certain level of prisoners, a certain level of convicts coming through, which then, it is often argued, I think very successfully, influences sentencing structures from judges who are on the same ballot often as the politicians who've delivered the prison to the town. So, the role that prisons can play in politics is hard to overestimate. But did you know, for example, that a German court recently refused to extradite a prisoner to the UK because the state of UK prisons would, I think that, and I must check this story, but I think the contention was that the state of the British prison into which a German prisoner would have been extradited, or rather a British prisoner currently in a German jail, there's a philosophical conundrum for you. Is a British prisoner in a German jail a German prisoner or a British prisoner? A British person in a German jail, is that a German prisoner? Or is that a British prisoner? But anyway, there was a prisoner in a German jail who was British, and German courts decided he couldn't be extradited to this country, I think, and as I say, I need to double check this, but quite a few of you are reminding me of it, and there is a small bell tinkling in the back of my brain, because the state of the UK prison would have potentially constituted a breach of the prisoner's human rights. And remember, Human rights are awful unless you're a human who likes rights. Can't believe we still have to make that point almost every morning in Suella Braverman's Brexit Britain. Down with human rights unless you're a human who likes having rights. In which case, please don't abolish human rights. So there it is. What is actually going on in how bad is it in prisons? How surprised are you, given your connection with the prison service, that somebody has managed to escape from a prison that seems to me to be one that he shouldn't have been in the first place? I think terror suspects and Belmarsh should go together like a horse and carriage, but I don't know much about that. And then we have the other question, the attendant question of why do you think prisons are not a more politically alive issue? Why don't we have politicians saying we're going to spend a lot of money on rehabilitating prisoners and we're going to bring the reoffending rate right down? We're going to show you the international examples and the international models that prove that this is the right approach. We're going to bring the reoffending rate down so low that the amount of money we currently spend on prisons will be enormously reduced. I don't know why they don't do that. Hit the numbers now and you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I don't know, is this Idiot's Corner? They've spelt bankrupt with a C rather than a K, so I don't know. I'll let you decide whether this is the first entrance into Idiot's Corner of the day. So it couldn't just be useless, lazy, incompetent staff at the prison. I would love to see O'Brien attempt to run any type of establishment, even for 6 months. It would be bankrupt in no time. That's bankrupt spelt with a C from our first genius of the day. I do run an establishment. I run the most successful radio show, talk show in the history of UK commercial radio, pal. Got a team of 2 and a budget of pennies.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:18 is the time. Hi, James. I'm a Samaritan and I'm also the branch prison support officer for my local prison. Believe me, you do not want to know what it's like in there. Maggie, believe me, I do. I may not like what I learn, but I certainly do. And of course, the worse it is, perhaps the more pertinent the attendant question this morning becomes, which is why are prisons not a more politically... What's the word I'm looking for, by the way? I keep saying alive, or pertinent. I say pertinent too much. More politically... issue. And here's your story. I mean, why isn't this everywhere? Why isn't the Daily Mail getting upset about this? A German court has refused to extradite to the UK a man accused of drug trafficking because of concerns about prison conditions in Britain. The decision has been described as a severe rebuke and an embarrassment for the UK by a member of the Law Society. This is Suella Braverman's patch, really, isn't it? Prisons. This is Suella Braverman's broken Britain, where Germans won't extradite criminals to the United Kingdom or criminal suspects to the United Kingdom because the state of our prisons is so bad. It's an Albanian man. So now the other question gets even more complicated. An Albanian man in a German prison who they want to extradite to Britain. Is he a British prisoner, a German prisoner, or an Albanian prisoner? I don't know. But the regional court, the higher regional court in southwest Germany, made its decision earlier this year. It's only just been made public, and a translation of the court report said, the court decided... I nearly did a German accent then. Imagine how... God, I'd probably get cancelled. The court decided that the extradition of the Albanian to Britain was currently inadmissible. Without British guarantees, extradition is impossible in view of the state of the British prison system. There are no legal remedies against this. Wow. So British prisons are so bad that German authorities won't extradite criminal suspects here. Jerry's in Yorkshire. Jerry, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
I've recently retired from the prison service after 25 years.
Okay.
Why is it not more political in the public eye?
Yeah.
Because the public don't care.
Do they not?
No. Once your latest monster is paraded through the tabloids throughout the trial,
yeah,
and put behind the wall, the public forget about them.
But that's chicken and egg. That's where my introduction started this morning. If you looked at reoffending rates, or if you looked at, for example, there's an astonishing statistic that Julie's just sent me about female prisoners, women prisoners in Scotland, and the percentage of them that have suffered serious head injuries in the past is in the high 70%. And then you look at childhood trauma, you look at literacy rates. If the statistics on that were in the newspapers as often as the statistics about small boats are, then we'd probably sort the prison system out by tea time. Charged, Jerry, politically charged.
Yeah.
That's the word we want. Thank you, Tamsin.
I think the the problem is that the prison service, prison staff, they work like goalkeepers. As long as everything's running right in the prison system, i.e., as far as the public are concerned, nobody's getting over the wall. Yeah, the public don't care.
In 1984, nobody died. In 1985, nobody died. In 1986, nobody died. In 1987, one person died. So that's how they view it, really. It's only keeping a lid on things.
Absolutely.
Do we know how bad it is, Jerry? You've recently retired. Compared to how it was when you started 25 years ago, give me a quick thumbnail sketch comparison.
Well, I'll give you a quote from a governor. I was a POA representative for 20 of those years.
Prison Officers Association.
Yes. So I had regular discussions with management and occasional disagreements, as you can imagine.
Of course.
And one governor told me once, behave yourself. I was your senior officer on the wing, on the same wing as I was working. I've walked those landings. I know how it is. And it was true, he had walked those landings. But when he did so, the staffing for that wing was 16 staff, 2 senior officers every day, a wing manager on an evening. On a weekly basis, 9 to 5. Now, when I was having that conversation, the staffing was being cut to 12 staff, including a senior officer replacement, a supervising officer. They changed the name. So you cut the staffing by 25%.
When did that happen? Austerity or sooner under Labour?
Well, I think you're looking back around about 6-7 years ago, that particular week.
The grayling years. The good old grayling years, perhaps, was it?
Failing grayling. Oh, we've had some crackers. We used to have Liz Truss, you know.
My thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers are with you. I don't know if you... Well, thank you, Jerry. Can I ask you a slightly cheeky question?
You can.
Did prisoners call you Mr. Mackay?
I got that occasionally, yep.
Or were they now too young? The younger generation. A couple of my texters having a similarly childish sense of humour to my own. Thank you, Jerry. I hope you're enjoying your retirement. Proud to keep you company during it. Nick's in St John's Wood. Nick, what would you like to say?
Yeah, morning, James. So when I was in Wandsworth in 2012 and eventually coming out of prison in 2018, the experience in Wandsworth was one of, human warehousing, dysfunctional operation. The officers did as well as they could do under the circumstances. Probably poorly paid.
Sure.
The older officers were, I think, ex-army, ex-police, ex-fire brigade, whatever you want to call them. And
what they are. So I'll take your word for it that they are the things that you've just said.
Let's not go down that street. But at the end of the day, they were people trying to do a job, under Victorian conditions, in my view, and it was a very unpleasant place to be and live. And people move on quite quickly from there, unless you're on remand, like the chap who's gone missing was. I take the view, and you mentioned Chris Grading, and Chris Grading wouldn't give me books when I was in prison.
That was an astonishing policy. Can you remember what the rationale behind it was?
The rationale was that why should prisoners have the privilege to read and better themselves whilst in prison?
Are you sure? Because, even by the standards of this shower, that sounds unlikely.
So this is the reason why I've rang in, and this is to talk about the white papers that the government have written over the last 15, 20 years. They've actually written 3 very, very good, well-articulated, clever papers about prison reform and what they can do about the prison system. And if you remember what Winston Churchill once said, he said you should define society by the way we treat our prisoners.
You're absolutely right. The Bible says something similar, actually.
That's it. So there we are. So having unfortunately experienced 6 years in prison, and I deserve to go to prison for the offence that I committed, and I did my time. I came out, and I believe, rehabilitation has been a good part of me, sort of like healing from the silly mistakes that I made. But the bottom line is, 75% of people reoffend, 38% in the first year. So had Chris Grady not done what he did, you may have actually reduced that number by giving people the opportunity to get out of prison when they want to get out and go to work.
It's a mad, one of the maddest things I can remember covering on the programme, actually.
Yeah.
The idea of banning books for prisoners.
Yep, and there's no rationale behind it whatsoever.
Well, exactly the idea that books are a luxury. God, dear. It was when they got tired of comparing it to a prison camp, they could start comparing it to a library. It's like a library in there. It's not a prison at all. It is. Why do you think it's not a more politically charged? Well, it is politically charged in the sense that Chris Grayling thought that there was brownie points in banning books. But why is it not been?
Well, I had this conversation with three different prison governors, three different prisoners.
Yeah.
Out of the 9 prisons that I went to, and they all came up with the same answer. And I've mentioned this on before on LBC.
Go on.
And the answer they came up with was, we do not want to be embarrassed, and we have to appease the Daily Mail. Now, you make out of that what you want. I don't read the Daily Mail, but that was their answer, all three of them. So has the MOJ actually put that point that this is the way the governors need to be, and don't embarrass themselves? Well, I can tell you one thing: they're embarrassed now. What happened?
Well, yes, they are embarrassed now. Although, I mean, it's not necessarily a consequence of not prioritising rehabilitation. It's probably a consequence of staffing levels or similar to that, or just possibly 1 or 2 officers having a really bad day. But people don't understand the relevance of the media to these sort of conversations. It's always helpful to me to hear proof of it from people in the midst of a story. You look, the BBC does things to avoid getting a kicking from the Daily Mail. Everybody does things to avoid getting a kicking from the Daily Mail. It's quite bizarre how much influence and power that organ has. And just remember yesterday when we were talking about people who were off work with diagnosed illnesses, and they used the language languish, do you remember? Languishing on benefits, ordered to go back to work, and what was the other one? Docked, I think. The benefits will be docked if they can't refuse. It's very deliberate. So, you know, that's written approvingly of a policy. You bring in a policy that is designed to reduce reoffending by treating prisoners with a modicum of humanity and trying to help them deal with some of the traumas that have left them in the situations where criminality becomes more likely, never excusable, but explicable. Line between excusable and explicable becomes crucial once again. Then those media and it's not just the Daily Mail, of course. It's the dinosaur-like Daily Mails in human form that used to populate this genre of media, and there's a few still around, but they just punt it out there all the time. It's not like a prison, it's like a holiday camp. Surprised they don't die of boredom listening to their own voices. It's incredible, but that is the problem. You put out a scheme designed to reduce recidivism, designed to reduce reoffending, and the voices that have dominated British politics for the last 50 years will start complaining about it. And we only ever talk about prisons when someone escapes. So we're all to blame, me included. It is coming up to 10:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:33. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. This is strong from a Twitter account called No Hostages. The Tories and their journalists believe in strength. They believe that punishing offenders is a good in and of itself. If it rehabilitates, then that's a bonus. But the main purpose of prisons is to show the public that they can hurt bad people. And because they believe the world is just, they believe that prisoners deserve it. I love that line. It's the people who were born 3-0 up who think they scored a hat-trick syndrome, isn't it? If they experienced traumas that led them down the path of criminality, it does not matter. Justice demands that the righteous inflict suffering on these immoral criminals. And when you factor into that the British class system allows some of the most thin-skinned and pathetic human beings in the land to persuade themselves, let alone others, that they are tough. Remember Brexit hardman Steve Baker? They're tough guys and thick-skinned and capable of and everyone else is woke, and then literally you creep up behind them and go boo, and they jump into their nanny's arms. It's incredible the way that narrative has gone. But I think that analysis fits in many ways prisons. Back to the bigger questions of the morning. Lucy is in Wandsworth. Lucy, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Hello. I'm not sure how much I can add to your show, but Working at Wandsworth, it's really just to reiterate the chronic understaffing.
But it's not reiterating, because I'm picking it up a bit anecdotally. You work at the prison, do you?
I do.
So
I do.
How bad is it?
Really bad, very, very bad. The problem also is staff retention, and you've got new staff teaching newer staff, which just creates an environment that is actually incredibly dangerous for both prisoner and prison or anyone who works there.
When did you start there, if you don't mind me asking? I don't want you to give away too much, so don't answer. Years ago. That helps.
Years ago.
And can you spot milestones in the decline? Can you date milestones in the decline?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a gradual. Since I started, it's been a gradual decline. Right. A lot of the people that when I started, there were a lot of kind of the old school officers were there, and almost none of them are there now. And it's just all new people.
And how often? I mean, what are the numbers like on the? You took me by surprise by stopping talking then, Lucy. I thought you'd taken a deep breath, and that's absolutely fine. What in terms of shifts being full? How does that work? I mean, the full complement of staff turning up every day, or is it there loads of overtime? How do shortages translate into numbers on the job?
Lack of numbers. You get at night time, yes, which is a particularly vulnerable point. You get people being asked to do double shifts.
Right.
And that's not a rare occurrence.
So what have you been in since the escape?
No, I haven't.
What will it have done to morale, or what will the atmosphere be?
I would say morale, people just carry on, don't they?
Of course they do.
The job still has to be done. And people have to be protected, and, the job has to be done. So I would imagine morale is incredibly low with everyone.
And then, of course, staff will probably at some point come in for a kicking, and very little attention will be paid by the kickers to the broader context of cuts and shortages. Thank you, Lucy. 10:37 is the time. I'm going to talk to Dave in Guildford next, but I just want to give you a quick heads up, or indeed what we often call a trigger warning, that Dave's story will involve a fairly graphic description of self-harm, which we've decided is essential to the story that he'll tell us. But if that's something that is likely to disturb you or anyone that's currently with you listening to the radio, then do be warned. Dave, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, morning, James.
Hello.
A couple of points, really. The one with the graphic detail I'll explain in a minute, but the first one's a bit of an easier point, is that the reason why that governments don't sort of promote or talk about prisons and prisoners too much is because it's not a vote winner.
Yeah.
So people, they have the concept that the general public believe that prisoners should be given nothing and throw away the key. And so because of that, if they were to say, we're spending money on prisons, we're improving the environment for prisoners and people that work there, they believe that the general public would think that's a waste of money. But the other point I wanted to make was involving the escape from Wandsworth.
Yes.
I was involved in an escape. A prisoner escaped from me when I was in the prison service, whilst I was on an escort. And I'll just briefly, if I can, tell you the story. So I've been out of the service for about 12 years. Okay. I worked in both environments, male and female. This happened at a male establishment. I was leaving duty one day after a day working during the day. I went to the gate lodge where you hand in your keys to leave duty, for that to sort of sign off, and then you hand over to the night staff. When I went to the gate lodge, the duty governor was in the gate lodge, and she was asking if anybody would extend or stay on to facilitate escorting a prisoner to hospital due to an act of self-harm that he'd done.
Right.
Due to the fact that the prison I was working at didn't have 24-hour healthcare. Right. So anything outside of sort of office hours, if you like, had to be facilitated at hospital. So I volunteered to do it with another colleague. The aforementioned prisoner was in the segregation unit because he had a telephone concealed in his person, shall we say.
Yes.
I'll leave that to your imagination.
So he was being punished. He was on enhanced punishment.
Well, it wasn't being punished. They needed to get the phone out, and the only way they could do that was
by keeping a very close eye on proceedings, Dave.
Yes, and so that it passed through him, basically. Anyway.
Go on.
So we went down to the segregation unit, and on the way, the governor said she would regale me with the reasons as to why he'd done what he'd done. And she said to us that he'd self-harmed because he'd spoken to his girlfriend on the out, who had been forced into an arranged marriage. Okay?
Yeah.
So we get to the segregation unit, And I was what's called IC of the escort, in charge of the escort. So all the paperwork that goes with it, all the arrangements are down to me. My colleague would just purely be handcuffed to the prisoner. When I applied the handcuffs, the governor at the time asked me not to apply them in the correct position, but to apply them above the elbow on the fat of the arm, which was against all protocol.
Right.
So I questioned it, and I said, well, it's against protocol, Governor. I'm not happy about doing that. But I said to her, obviously, you're the governor. You signed the paperwork. That's fine with me, you know. If a prison governor says to you, open all the gates and let them out, that's what you do. They're in charge.
Yes.
So we done that. Went by ambulance to the hospital. Went into triage. Bearing in mind, this is now probably about 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
Went into the triage. We're triaged. I reapplied the handcuffs to the... In fact, he didn't leave the handcuffs at any time. There's a process where you swap the cuffs over while he's still handcuffed so they can manoeuvre him around and treat him. Anyway, all those protocols were followed, all the paperwork annotated correctly. Went to leave the hospital. 2 a.m. we left there. The prison hadn't facilitated how we were going to get back. So I was left in a hospital in the middle of the night with a prisoner who was deemed a flight risk anyway, due to the fact he had a mobile phone on him.
Right.
Okay. As we went to leave, I went to put my hand in an escort. You have an escort bag with a mobile phone in it for my use, to phone a taxi to get me back to the prison, which was my only way of getting back.
Yeah.
Whilst I was doing that, my colleague let out an expletive. I turned round and the prisoner was off on his toes.
Right.
What he'd done was he'd pumped up the fat of his arm during this time in the segregation unit, self-harmed.
How did he do that? How did he pump? What you mean, doing exercises?
Yeah, you know, like if you do something like, you know, it makes your arms fatten up at the top. If you like, you know, you can do press ups or you can
okay, right, okay.
There's various ways of doing it. He was a very skinny prisoner anyway, in all fairness.
Okay.
So what he'd done was he knew that the handcuff would then slip off down the fat of his arm when it had relaxed, if you like.
Yeah.
And off he went. So I then phoned the prison, which I'm duty bound to do, obviously, and phoned the police, which I'm duty bound to do.
Yeah.
So the police turn up. Luckily, there was a security office at the hospital who had CCTV of what happened.
Right.
The sergeant said to me, he looked at it, and they ran us back to the jail, obviously, to meet with the governor, who then had to come in. He said to me that you're exonerated, you didn't do anything wrong.
Sure.
He said, I need to speak to your governor. So when we got back to the prison, he took her upstairs to her office, or went upstairs with her to her office. She came down ashen-faced.
Right.
Because she knew that what she'd done was against protocol, right?
As in saying it's okay to... Yeah, go on.
This story gets better. So... what I forgot to mention was during the escort, the governor had said to me, if he wants to make a phone call to a member of his family, he can use the prison phone.
Okay.
So I said, you what? He can use the prison phone. She said, yeah, because if you put it on the paperwork, Governor, that's up to you.
Right.
So I facilitated a phone call, which was what the governor wanted. Right. Anyway, he goes. It's then investigated.
Yeah.
During the investigation, the outcome of the findings were that I needed to have handcuff training. Yeah?
Yeah.
And the prison governor in question was moved to head office in London.
Right.
Right. They eventually caught the prisoner, returned him to custody. The governor, this governor had gone by now, but the new governor called me up and said, oh, Ross, just to let you know, blah, 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 he's been caught. And I said, oh, what happened, Governor, out of interest? So this is the story they said. That he escaped the handcuffs, ran to a house near where the hospital was, 2 a.m, knocked on the door. The person on the door answered it, and not only took him to the train station, but gave him the train fare to go to Birmingham.
Well, and you think that's on... I don't know how relevant this is to the conversation we're having today about what happened in Wandsworth, but it's a cracking tale. So what are you suggesting?
Well, the relevance is because that the people at the top... Yeah.
Right.
They don't know what they're doing. It's
I see.
When you talk about the health service, when you talk about all these all these sort of public sector things, the thing about a prison specifically with staff is that, like your last caller, was it Lucy or Lisa? Sorry.
Lucy, yeah.
Prison officers are firefighting on a daily basis. That's all they do.
Yes, of course.
That's all they're doing. Nothing else. And it's even worse now since I've left because of Spice. the drug spice.
Yeah, that has. I've heard before that's absolutely changed. Even from people who thought that they were pretty au fait with drugs, are completely knocked out by spice. Just out of curiosity, Dave, what do you think? Are you suggesting that the story was what's the story? Cock and bull.
I can tell you exactly what happened.
Go on then, yeah. Try and do it a bit shorter than the last bit. All right.
Okay, no worries. He's got a phone plugged up his rear end.
Right.
He texts one of his.
So he gets picked
outside.
up. He didn't knock on anyone's door and somehow mysteriously persuade them to drive.
He said at X time or next day, I'm going to self-harm. There's no 24-hour healthcare. They'll have to send an ambulance right in the car park outside the jail. Follow the ambulance.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Then I'll sit the cuffs, bing, bang, bong. Jobs are good. Simple.com.
How long did he stay out for? Simple.com.
Well, a couple of months. But the irony of it was, which is a funny little addendum to it, is he was texting and phoning prisoners at the prison
while he was out
to thank me for letting him out, sort of thing. Which
cheeky beggar.
You know,
yes.
Yeah, he got caught, but
it's an illustration of a mess, an institutional mess, a managerial mess. I don't know that this story today is on the same page really, but you would have thought that, naively, you'd have thought that somebody in prison would be watched closely enough not to be able to secrete himself either into or underneath a van that subsequently drives out through the prison gates. I wonder who's going to get the blame for this one, Dave. Probably you.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10 minutes to 11 is the time. So, bizarrely, I got sent a book yesterday that I was already looking forward to reading for two reasons. The author had been in touch with me privately, and John Sweeney had been in touch with me, the great John Sweeney, him of the hat, had been in touch with me to alert me to the imminent arrival of the book and to make sure that I spoke to the author. And that arrived yesterday, and I had it in my rucksack this morning when I was coming into work, because I'm looking forward to reading it. And then I got off the tube at Leicester Square, and there was a poster advertising the book that actually said at the bottom of the poster, imprisoned in HMP Wandsworth, or words to that effect. And I thought, crikey, that's a bit of a coincidence, given that the big news story of the day involves someone who's escaped from HMP Wandsworth. I'm going to work on the premise, Chris Atkins, who is a BAFTA-nominated filmmaker and former prisoner, that you haven't organised this breakout entirely to draw attention to the imminent publication of your book that looks at the stories of repeat offenders and examines why they repeat offend so much.
You're not the first person to say that, James.
No.
I'm sad to say he's not hiding in my wardrobe.
It's nothing to do with you.
Maybe I'll let him out once I've done my media rounds.
What was your first thought yesterday when this story popped up in your newsfeed?
I mean, you just think, God, you're just amazed it doesn't happen more often, James. You know, you look at it from the outside and it looks like a big, scary, terrifying, secure place. And you go in and it's like I describe as a dystopian Fawlty Towers. It's just, abject chaos on a day-to-day basis. And it just farce minute by minute. So, officers, fresh out of school, 8 weeks training, paid minimum wage. There's not enough of them. Those that are there are all filling out forms. Everything's handwritten on paper, if you can still believe that. You're old as I am. You remember, like at school, all the carbon copies and slips and chips? Yeah. It's like that. It's like going back to the 1970s. And as I say, things like this do seem to happen with terrifying frequency. If it's not escapes, it's riots, it's hangings, it's the whole system is just completely crumbling around the ears of the officers.
And yet there's no political capital in it. It often seems, which I know is something you address in part in the new book. This idea of there being no appetite whatsoever to improve the scenario. That's almost even more Kafkaesque than the chaos that you've just described.
Absolutely, because I think the things that we can do to make it better, and by better I mean lowering crime and lowering reoffending, are blindingly obvious. Like, everyone knows what the solutions are. It is spend a bit more money on housing. So when prisoners are released, they don't go onto park bench. They've got somewhere safe and secure to live. It's spend money on education. 50% of prisoners are functionally illiterate. So it's why
just say that again. 50. 50
is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
50%
absolutely bonkers.
And you've got them. You've got a captive audience. You could just teach them to read and write when they're inside. No, all that funding got cut under the Tories.
Right.
Huge numbers of prisoners, maybe 89% of prisoners have some kind of mental health problem. And the joke is, if you don't have one before you go in, you'll get one when you're inside. So why not treat their mental health problems? No, we don't. The mental health problems get worse. A lot of them have drug problems. Those drug problems get worse inside. So if you compare it to a hospital, it's like a hospital that makes people more sick.
Do we know whether Wandsworth is a particularly pertinent example of the broader malaise you describe, or whether it's just of a piece with the rest of the prison system?
I was told it was particularly bad. So when I arrived in Wandsworth on my first day, the terrifying officer said to me, it was the largest prison in Europe. It was the second most overcrowded in the UK, and it had the highest suicide rate when I arrived. That was my introduction to the place. And when I went to other prisons...
Sounds like a holiday camp, Chris, doesn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah. Lags living it up.
Yes.
And when I went to other prisons, people would say, where were you? I said, I was in Wandsworth. And they're looking, oh, God, respect, man. So, yeah, it was particularly bonkers.
Tell us a bit about the new book, which we shall probably talk about again at rather more length, but it is so on the money of what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. It's the recidivism, isn't it, that is the hardest thing to get your head around, because by every available measure, reducing reoffending is a win for absolutely everybody, society at large, the prison system in particular, the former prisoners, of course, soon to be... So what was the purpose of the book? And, of course, the victims, the potential victims, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So the big number that just blew me away was 80% of all crimes are reoffences. So they're crimes that have been committed by someone who's been to prison before. So 45% of ex-prisoners reoffend within a year of release. And it costs the state $18 billion a year. So if you can sort out reoffending, you'll suddenly sort out a huge amount of crime. I'm amazed more people aren't talking about it. So what I do is because I met a lot of people inside. I was inside in 2016. And that's why I've known a lot of these guys for sort of 7 years in some cases. So they don't really see me as a journalist.
Right.
I'm not a journalist anyway. They see me as another ex-con. So I've kind of got quite a good access to their lives and stories. And I follow some of them who just go in and out and in and out. And I look at the systems that are supposed to be in place to steer them away from reoffending on the outside. And what actually happens is those systems steer them right back into a prison cell. And we're all paying for that. Everyone's paying.
And you are in many ways insulated from that by your socioeconomic status and your class before you went in, and your education.
Yeah. So I'm the exception, not the rule.
Sure.
You know, I'm a middle class guy. Had a great selection of family and friends to come out to look after me. You know, I work in media. Maybe the standards are lower. I don't know. But but for a lot of these guys, they come out. They've got housing's a big one, James. You know, and you put anyone on the streets. Doesn't matter who they are, where they're from. You make anyone sleep on a park bench, they're going to end up getting sucked into crime because there's no roof over their head. And what happened? All the funding for housing got cut. Some of these people come out. They've got terrible mental health problems. They're getting medication in prison.
Right.
They come out, suddenly no medication. People, some of them have schizophrenia, quite dangerous conditions if they don't get their meds. So what happens is they reoffend and they go back in. So the book, time after time, is really just looking at that terrible cycle. Bizarrely, one guy, Simon McClellan, he actually committed a similar prison break about 10 years ago by pretending to be his own twin brother. Okay, he got his twin brother to get arrested for drunk and disorderly. He was serving 4 or 5 years. They got into the same cell. They switched places. Simon walked right out the front. Again, national manhunt, ports closed, complete national embarrassment. When they got him, and they always get them in the end, and he went to trial, the judge threw it out. Why? Because they're non-identical twins. They don't look anything like each other.
Seriously?
There was no excuse. It was prison incompetence.
Which is probably what will emerge.
We'll find out
more on this case as well.
When we find out how he got out, but it's not going to be a pretty tale for whoever's in charge of security that day.
No. Time after time, Repeat Offenders, The Inside Stories by Chris Atkins is quite remarkably published today. And is available, therefore, in all good bookshops. We'll talk again at more length, I think, because I hugely enjoyed a bit of a stretch, your first book, which was essentially about your experiences, your diaries. And this, as you say, is more of an examination of some of the issues that continue to concern anybody really paying attention. Chris Atkins, thank you. 10:58 is the time. I can squeeze in one more. Adam's in Reading. Adam, what would you like to say?
Yeah, just talking about Wandsworth. I worked there for over 15 years and just left recently. I just want to bring it to people's attention. Like they don't really understand what goes on behind there.
No.
I mean, there was, up to quite recently, it was the largest prison in Europe, housing nearly 1,600 prisoners. When the cuts come in 2010, 2011, I was in a unit that held 300 prisoners. We had 6 staff, 6 to 300 prisoners. So they're entitled to exercise. Every door got opened for exercise every day. So And that's 6 staff to 300 prisoners. And from there, you've got people serving 20 years for murder, or you might have someone in doing 2 weeks for nicking a donut from Greg's. It's a complete melting pot.
What they think? I mean, it doesn't. I don't even think. I know they needed to save money, but some of the austerity stuff was clearly ideological. It was the small state, low taxes, vampires that were trying to sort of hijack the global financial crisis. But would you save that much money by decimating?
I think it was to do more with they offered a thing called beds out to officers that had been in the job.
So the older ones with more experience who had pension provision and decent wages, get rid of them and replace them with school leavers on minimum wage.
Massive, and it was hard enough running a wing with. We might have had nine staff with a senior officer, but that was experience. It was jailcraft. It was manageable.
Yeah.
And then you're basically opening, a wing of 300 prisoners with 6-7 staff. The longest now probably a year in. It's just an accident waiting happening now. I've been saying it for a long time.
And there it is. And of course, this is in a sense. I mean, touch wood, nobody gets hurt, and he's soon recaptured. But of course, other disasters that can happen as a consequence of the chaos and the staffing issues you described could have much more unpleasant ramifications, could be much more tragic, even fatal, as Chris Atkins alluded to a moment ago. It is. I've just had a flick through this morning, and it's a cracking book. He can really write. So Time After Time, that one's called. And yesterday, of course, we spoke to Rory Stewart about his book, which Patricia in South London has already read. Well, she's got well stuck into it because she tells us that in Rory's new book, when he writes about when he was Minister for Prisons and what he came up against when he literally tried to enact and introduce some of the ideas that we have been bemoaning the absence of all morning. But there it is. It's news, but it's a little bit more dog bites man than man bites dog, it would seem.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to two stories, which are, well, I'm not going to suggest for a moment that they're linked, but I suddenly realised as we were discussing a moment ago what we would do next. Mystery Hour coming up at 12, of course, don't forget. It's the same story. It's sort of the same story. It's the cost of child... It's not the same story. It's not the same story. But it is sort of the same story. It's not the same story. So it's the cost of childcare, right? That's quite well documented. But there was a thread on Twitter yesterday started by, I think, a Guardian journalist who talked about it going up to £949 a month for 3 days a week for one child. That is absolutely insane. And I don't know how the socioeconomics work on this. I presume that for people for whom that sum of money is inconceivable, that is when a parent will always stay at home. Or in the case of a single parent family, you'll be entirely reliant on benefits payments until your baby's old enough to go to school, at which point you'll hopefully get a job. But the sum there, look, as a middle class bloke, a very middle class, like a poster boy for the middle class, privileged bloke, I can't believe my eyes. I don't even remember what we did, I'm afraid. It's so mad, isn't it, that we've been doing this together for so long that sometimes in your mind, I know you still think that I've got young children at home, because one of the great advantages of having young children at the time and actually becoming a father while I was doing this job was that you could hear me becoming conscious of things that you already knew about, or you could hear me showing you the way about what you would have to encounter when it came to education or schools or other parenting issues. But mine are way out of this. The youngest started primary school 10 years ago. We're way out of this now. I can't remember what we did. And I know that Mrs. O'Brien stepped back from work quite a lot, more than we were expecting, actually, because you never know what you're going to do, and to have the freedom to do that was a wonderful thing. But £949 a month for 3 days a week. You just can't afford it. And this journalist writes, it's nearly bankrupting us, and I can only work 20 hours a week max as a result. Another reply told us that nurseries are so oversubscribed where she is that they registered their fetus for the days that they needed, just 4 days a week, when she was 3 months pregnant, before they'd even told some family they were pregnant, and that's going to cost £1,200 a month. And that's a huge, huge increase in the last few months. That is part of the thing that we'll explore. So that was one of the contenders for the conversation that we're going to have this hour. But the other one was news that the competition regulator has begun a review of veterinary services amid concerns that their costs are rising faster than inflation. So the Competition and Markets Authority is going to look into how services for pets are bought and sold. Now, I've already made the mistake of suggesting that childcare costs and pet care costs are essentially the same story. So, in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm now going to bring undertakers into the conversation. But don't look at me like that. This makes sense, all right? I remember a few years ago when it was revealed that high street undertakers, family firms, the ones with which we were all passingly familiar, ideally not through actually having to avail ourselves of their services, but through knowing exactly where they sat on the high street. There was a superb documentary I remember watching that revealed how many of them had been bought by the same massive American conglomerate. And very cleverly, having bought them, they left them looking like they looked before, so it would still be called Keith & Sons. It would still have the old name above the door, but the outfit, the company, the going concern had been bought lock, stock and coffin by this massive American conglomerate that then, of course, could control the market. So much of the service did they own that they could put prices up. And I think the suspicion is that vets might have been subject to similar forces. In fact, the Times reports this morning that the market has been transformed by consolidation. Right? So independent practices are being taken over by groups. It used to be the case that small practices accounted for 89% of the industry. That was 10 years ago. By 2021, that had fallen to 45%. Presumably, it's fallen a little further now. And that means even if you're phoning up 3 different vets to ask how much it's going to cost to get Tiddles neutered, the answer will be the same. We've got, and you're going to laugh at me now, you really are, we've currently got 3 cats and a dog. And the amount of money, do you ever do the thing where you don't look at it because you don't want to know? I first did this with coffee. One day, I used to buy coffees for everyone in the team every day when I came to work. And one day, I added up how much it was costing me a month. And as soon as I did that, I never did it again. You can buy your own blooming coffee. I couldn't believe. So never do these things. Never look at it. Never add it up. There was a nice little artisan coffee shop downstairs where the old studios were. And I'd come in every morning with about 5 coffees. I added up how much I was spending a month. And it was absurd. Absolutely shocking. So I don't ask. I am the least petty person in our family, right? 3 cats and a dog. I'm not anti-pet. I am not as big an idiot as I was when I started in this job, when I used to take the mickey out of people for loving their pets more than their humans in their lives. But then I got a message. I wrote about this in my second book. I got a message from a chap who'd recently lost his wife, and he said, without our 2 Dachshunds, I think they were Dachshunds, I honestly wouldn't have survived. And I thought, you've got to stop taking the mickey out of people who are heavily, heavily, heavily reliant upon their pets. There was another one of those things that without your help, I would have not been able to rescue myself from my own idiocy. You can tell what I'm planning here. I'm not talking about undertakers, but I am planning on having a conversation that runs the cost of childcare alongside the cost of pet care. Now, that puts pressure on you because I don't know why, and I don't want to be rude, but the average listener is not very good at keeping 2 thoughts in their head at the same time while I'm on the radio. So there are 2 completely separate phone-ins here, which are also in many ways the same. Yeah, I think. So I think on the second one, the animals, I'm just going to go for how expensive is it? Because I think it's going to be eye-watering for people who don't know and almost affirming for people who do. So and I'm talking about either relatively straightforward procedures that you can't quite believe the cost of, or tons of money that you've spent on your pet because you love your pet more perhaps than you love almost anything else in the world. So other people I have to confess that spending a heck of a lot of money on a goldfish, which we took a call on once, will never quite make sense to me. I think an animal that you can't stroke is kind of hard to understand the emotional bond with. But I'm certainly not going to take the mickey out of you like I would have done once. But what the most amount of money on a procedure for a pet is kind of what I'm looking for this hour. But I don't want you to rule yourself out. It's not just a competition to find the most amount of money ever spent on a pet. It's a slightly more grown-up examination of the Competition and Market Authority's review into the question of whether or not we are being scalped effectively by vets. 0345 6060 973, okay? And I would like to hear, just because I'm a bit childish, I would like, if you spent 30 grand getting your dog's new knees or something like that, then I would quite like to hear that, just, because it cost you 4, wouldn't it? And alongside that, I want to know not so much how much your childcare costs, because this is going to be in a ballpark, I think, figures with a slight geographical variation. But having been completely ambushed by the cost of childcare, right? I'm talking about you now. You have been completely ambushed by it. And just when you thought you'd got used to the ambush, you thought you'd got used to what you were paying a year ago, the cost of living, energy and the rest of it, and probably staff shortages as well, because we see them in all sectors as a consequence of the brilliant Brexit. I want to know how you've changed your life unexpectedly as a consequence of rocketing childcare costs. So I am trying, and I am nothing if not optimistic, to run concurrent phone-ins about the cost of childcare and the cost of pet care, the difference being that the pet care about which we're talking is the cost of veterinary treatment, which doesn't always involve being sick. I think most of us probably pay over most to have our animals spayed or neutered or whatever the right word is these days. But, I've got a cat. He's quite old now. I do actually love him. I'm not going to lie to you. I'll be gutted when he shuffles off this mortal coil. When we lost his brother, I was in pieces. But he's off his food at the moment. And we've got builders in at the moment, so there's a lot of money going out every week. Mrs. O'Brien said this morning, we better take him to the vet. He's off his food. And I thought, oh, crikey, can't we just give him some prawns and see if he'll eat? Because I know it's going to, and I said, well, I don't want to know how much it, because you look at the number and you can't say no. If you've got the money or you can get your hands on it, it's your little kitty catty. I'm not telling you his name. But that you can't, I can't. So, go on then. I think I've set that up fairly well, haven't I? There's two sort of plates spinning at the same time. One's full of children, the other's full of pets. 0345 6060 973. And please, feel free to chip in on both. I mean, God forbid that you've had to get rid of the pet to pay for the childcare, or possibly get rid of the child to pay for the veterinary bills. That would be, I'm joking, don't cancel me. That would be obviously a particularly well-qualified contribution to the conversation. It's 11:15. The number you need is 0345 6060. Yeah, I'm already getting 973. Sorry, I'm already getting the texts in about things I can't quite believe. I don't want to say that vets are taking the mickey, but some of this stuff. We've just got a quote for our Cocker Spaniel to have their teeth cleaned and about 4 or 5 teeth taken out. It's between £700 and £1,000, and because she's so old that pet insurance won't cover it. Fiona suggests she's in the wrong job. Fiona, mate, if those numbers are correct, then so am I.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 11, and do you think vets might be taking the mickey now? The amount of money that we are forking out to look after our pets, and I do have some qualifications on this, 4 of them. And how has being ambushed by childcare costs compelled you to make major changes in your life? Nikki's in Bedford. Pets or children?
Hiya, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome aboard, Nikki. Pets or children? Pets or children? What are we doing?
So I have a dog. I rescued him last year, took him in, gave him a loving home. I don't have any children,
right.
And he developed hip dysplasia in both of his hips. So I've just got him in following surgery in one of his hips, which is costing 10 grand, just for one hip from the operation. So I've literally just sat down, put the radio on to listen to you, and I've got to take him back for a follow-up, which is x-rays and another check, which will be an additional £600 just to take him back, just to make sure that the hip is recovering and just to make sure
How are the other three?
Okay with him. Sorry?
How are the other 3 hips?
Other 3 hips?
Yeah. Are they all right?
Oh. Well, I presume so. I know he's been measured up, but they've only done the worst.
Are you a lottery winner, or that's such a serious chunk of change?
Yeah. So I almost had a heart attack, and I had that heart sort of sink feeling. I felt absolutely sick. I didn't know what to do. But I think credit cards, family, he is part of the family. He is one of the children in the family to my parents.
Right.
And it's that, isn't it? It's if anything happens to one of your children, you do what you can to fix them, make them better. You go and find it, you're going to pay it. But yeah, it's a hell of a lot of money to find or just to try.
Forgive me for asking this question, because I don't think you'd want to think about it, but what is the alternative? If you literally couldn't get hold of the money, what would have happened? Would he have been put down?
Yeah, so when we found out how bad his hips actually are and the cost of it, my mum broke down in tears.
Yeah.
And she was just going, we will pay it, we will do whatever we can, we will pay it.
Did you get a second opinion?
Well, I knew his hips were bad for walking.
I know, but on the cost, I'm thinking, because you didn't, did you?
No, but we went to a local vet, and then the X-ray showed, and
no, I meant on the cost. I meant like a second quote, because it seems to me they've just plucked that figure out of the sky. 10 grand.
Well,
how long did it take? How long was it How long was he under the knife? Under the thing of me. Dogs only have 2 hips. Sorry, 2 hips.
So he was under for around 4 hours.
For 4 hours, £10,000. So they're on £2.5 grand an hour. How many people are in the operating theatre?
That I don't know, but they were excellent and they've looked after
I know. And it's work, so we don't care how much it cost. It's work. He seems happy.
Yeah, so he's had one done, and then I need to see how he gets on with the other one, and then at some point down the line, he might need the second one doing.
So that's another 10 grand?
Plus recovery fees.
So you're not going to get much change out of £25,000, Nikki?
Yeah, so now sitting here thinking about it, I just feel sick.
Well, I don't want you to feel sick, and I understand why you're doing it, and I'm glad I'm not that idiot anymore who would have sat here sort of mocking you, really, for what you do. I understand why your mum broke down in tears. But £20,000, I just can't believe. You'll tell me 10 years training or whatever it is, and a highly expert job, and it's entirely free market, this, isn't it? There's no NHS. It's you pay it if you want to. But if heavens above, you can stop texting me now that dogs only have 2 hips. I think that was a perfectly reasonable mistake to make, but now that I think about it, it was a bit thick of me, all right? But I know, two hips good, four hips bad. That deserved more. Joanne's in Monmouth. Joanne, what made you pick? I'm not going to get any phone calls about childcare this hour, you know. I've muffed it because the pet stories are so much more shocking in a way. What would you like to tell us, Joanne?
Well, so November last year, my husband always takes the dogs to work with him. He sets clay pigeon shoots, and our dog, we have Sussex Spaniels with quite rare.
Yes.
Our little girl ran underneath his vehicle he was driving.
Oh no!
And he shattered her back legs.
Oh, don't say he did.
I like to hold him totally.
No, I can tell that you do, but I don't want to be part of this vendetta again. He must have felt absolutely awful. It was the vehicle that did that.
I mean, honestly, I have never seen him cry, but he broke his heart.
Oh, bless him.
Absolutely broke his heart.
And here you are, outing him on national radio in front of 1.4 million people. Shame on you. Go on, what happened next?
So then we drove to our vets with her. Obviously, we didn't know what was broken at the time, but she was conscious, and so we drove her straight to our vet. He phoned me, and I immediately I said, "What's happened to the dogs?" Because it was like I knew.
Yeah.
So I got to the shoot. We drove together, got her to the vets. They X-rayed it, and our vet could only see one broken leg at the time, but she said it's shaft.
Oh.
So they couldn't do anything. So they referred her to a vet referral, so like super vet type place.
Yeah, of course.
So we had to go to Birmingham to Willows with her, which we went the next day, where they X-rayed her and obviously found the other shattered leg. Anyway, I have an insurance policy.
Right.
And so my insurance policy, and I laughed when I took my insurance out, saying, well, no one's going to spend more than £7,500 on a dog.
That was the excess, was it? Are we there? Have we lost Joanne? Oh.
Hello, sorry, I don't know
you
what
come back.
there.
You said to yourself, no one's going to spend more than £7,500.
I think it was my ear took over control of the phone.
Yeah.
So it was. So I have an insurance policy that will cover £7,500 worth of treatment, and I thought that was a lot. I thought, it's very rare you would spend £7,500 on a dog. Haven't had dogs all my life.
Of course.
It was £12,000. That's with all the aftercare, with the initial vet, when we took her in and got her X-rayed initially, to go back for the X-rays. It was just unbelievable.
And
so
you didn't hesitate.
Are you going to sell the car?
Yeah, that's what I mean. You just didn't hesitate. You think, right, well, we've got to do it. We've got to find the money.
Yeah, that's all we were thinking. We were just thinking, right, well, where are we going to get it from? And you just do it. You don't care. You just think, oh, no, we'll definitely do it. But it doesn't end there.
No.
Because, she's repaired and she's beautiful and all fixed. And because she's rare breed, she's just had a litter of puppies.
Okay.
She went into labour on a Saturday morning. Obviously, the vet's closed at Saturday lunchtime. Her waters had broke and she hadn't given birth, so I rushed her to the vets because there was nothing happening. And they had to, obviously, the surgery was closed, so I had to pay it out of hours. So I had paid another £3,000 for an emergency cesarean section.
Holy moly.
Which is joyous.
Yes,
we have spent a fortune.
But she pays her way a bit. How much do you get for a litter, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, the puppies are only between sort of £1,300 and £1,500 each. They're not expensive dogs. You don't overcharge for a Sussex family.
There's some people listening who think that's a lot for a dog, but they don't know about what's happened in that world in the last few years with these special breeds and these crossbreeds. I'm glad, I don't know how to say this. I don't have any sense. I almost don't recognise the person that would have taken this call 10 or 15 years ago and been spluttering incredulously, but there will be people listening who are spluttering incredulously at the sort of sums that we are hearing. It is absolutely insane. It's also the case, because such is the nature of humanity, that my phone lines are completely dominated by people talking about pets, and my very visionary plan to run this phone in alongside a phone in about childcare costs is currently completely scuppered. Because the vet stories are more shocking, I suppose. But you're still more than welcome to ring in when a phone line presents itself, and Joanne's has just, to tell us about just how you accommodate the astonishing cost of childcare. It's not so much about the numbers. The vet phoning is about the numbers. It's more about, well, I can't believe that I've had to do this. I can't believe I've had to give up my job. I can't believe that we've had to downsize our house or sell our car. The impact of childcare costs on your family life is what I'm interested in. And the number is, of course, the same, 0345 6060 973. We're expecting a statement in the House of Commons on the case of the escaped prisoner who concerned us, of course, in the first hour, Daniel Abed Khalif, who is a former British Army soldier and computer specialist who broke out of HMP Wandsworth just before 8 a.m. yesterday. It will be the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk. I don't know what the precedent is on this. I would have thought the Home Secretary might be tempted out of whatever it is she does all day. I've no idea. Polishes her broomstick, I suppose. But you'd have thought she might have been tempted into the House of Commons by this, but it's normal for the Justice Secretary to be doing it. We'll bring that to you live when it starts. But in the meantime, Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:33. I think the Home Secretary might be making some statement in the House about something else a little later in the day. So no big shakes that it is the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, who will be updating the House of Commons on the absconded. That's a great word. I can't believe we haven't used that word yet today. The absconding prisoner from HMP Wandsworth. So bear that in mind, because we may cross very quickly to the House of Commons to hear what he has to say. So don't be offended if it means I switch you off, I cut you off in full flow. Last caller mentioned Supervet, of course. I have to remind you, Noel Fitzpatrick, the Supervet, is one of the most remarkable guests I've ever had on the Full Disclosure series, my Full Disclosure podcast of long-form interviews. That's the fancy way of describing them. You could just say long interviews, but long form sounds better. It makes me sound like some sort of master of the genre. So the series, the Full Disclosure series of long form interviews, the Noel Fitzpatrick one is one of the most remarkable I've ever done, I think I can say with some confidence. And he certainly has things to say about the state of the veterinary industry these days and the proliferation of, what do they call it? Consolidation. But I'm just wondering what it's done to you. I am also interested in what childcare costs have done to your family's financial situation. But as I should have seen, the pets are ahead of the pack on this one. Josh is in Chelmsford. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, just sort of touching on what a lot of people have been saying, the ridiculous costs. I mean, my costs haven't been as bad as some of your previous people, but we got a Sprocket Spaniel puppy in July last year at the very end of the month. Got him insured straight away, but there's a clause in pet insurance that you can't make a claim for the first 2 weeks.
Right.
And yeah, our pet was being sick quite a lot, and obviously that's not good. So we took him in. Yeah. And after a couple of grand visit to the vets, we found out he had quite a serious condition. And then after having sort of days where he was in the vets all day, overnight stays, pet hospitals, he passed away at 4 months old after costing us about 10 grand.
Oh, mate. Had you? I need to ask you this. Was it a dodgy breeder?
Well, at first we thought no, because very good family friends of mine have a dog from the previous litter.
Right. Okay.
And I've met the dog loads of times, spent time with the dog, and he's lovely and he's loads of fun. And it was sort of that dog that made us fall in love with that specific breed. Yeah. And and it wasn't until a couple of years later, our family friends said, look...
I'm just going to cross. I did warn you, Josh. Thank you, mate. I'm just crossing into the House for this statement from the Justice Minister.
The escape from HMP Wandsworth yesterday morning, Wednesday the 6th of September, of a prisoner by the name of Daniel Abed Khalif. Daniel Khalif was remanded in custody at HMP Wandsworth on the 28th of January this year, having been charged with offences alleged to have taken place in 2021 while he was serving in the armed forces. As you, Madam Deputy Speaker, have already indicated, the House will understand that while there is a live criminal investigation in progress, there are limits on what I can properly say. Daniel Khalif will be caught in due course and will face a trial. Nothing should be said in this House or elsewhere that might prejudice those proceedings. So let me assist the House with what I can say. At approximately 7:30 yesterday morning, a vehicle which had made a delivery to the prison's kitchen left HMP Wandsworth. Shortly afterwards, local contingency plans for an unaccounted prisoner were activated, and in line with standard procedure, the police were informed. The prison was put into a state of lockdown while staff attempted to determine Daniel Khalif's whereabouts. The vehicle was stopped and searched by police after the alert was raised. Strapping was found underneath the vehicle, which appeared to indicate that Daniel Khalif may have held onto the underside of it in order to escape. The search is underway. His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service are giving every assistance to the Metropolitan Police's operation to recapture Daniel Khalif and return him to custody. As has been made clear by the Metropolitan Police, there is no reason to believe he poses a threat to the wider public. Yesterday, when I was first briefed on this grave security breach, I spoke to the Governor of HMP Wandsworth and senior HMPPS leaders to establish what was known about the escape and seek assurances about the immediate measures being taken to ensure the security of the prison. I made clear then, and I reiterate now, that no stone must be left unturned in getting to the bottom of what happened. Who was on duty that morning? In what roles? Ranging from the kitchen to the prison gate. What protocols were in place? Were they followed? Second, I've ordered an investigation into the categorisation decision by HMPPS. Were all relevant matters taken into consideration in determining where in the custodial estate Daniel Khalif should be held? In both cases, I've asked for the preliminary findings to be with me by the end of this week, and an assessment will be made then about what can properly be put into the public domain. I have also decided there will need to be an additional independent investigation into this incident, and that will take place in due course. I want to turn, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the wider prisoner cohort held by HMPPS. In light of these events, I've ordered 2 urgent reviews. First, into the placement and categorisation of everyone held in HMP Wandsworth, and second, into the location of all those in the custodial estate charged with terrorism offences. Let me turn now to the issue of prison security. As the House will no doubt be aware, escapes from prison are extremely rare, and the numbers have declined substantially in the last 10 to 15 years. This has been due in considerable part to sustained investment in improved physical and intelligence security. That includes investment of £100 million in the period since 2019 on measures such as enhanced gate security with X-ray body scanners, which has driven up the finds of drugs, weapons and other contraband, including tools that could be used to aid in escape from prison. HMPPS has also enhanced intelligence and anti-corruption operations in prison, working more closely than ever with partners including the intelligence agencies. This has involved productive initiatives such as setting up the joint Counter-Terrorism, Prisons and Probation Hub. Madam Deputy Speaker, Daniel Khalif will be found and he will be made to face justice. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, Shabana Mahmood.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement, and I would like to reiterate our support for the police and all of those who are involved in the search to recapture Daniel Khalife, and I very much hope that that search will be brought to a swift and successful conclusion so that the rest of the legal process may take place. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is an extremely serious matter, and it has highlighted catastrophic and multiple failures, not just in respect of this case, but of our wider criminal justice system. It simply beggars belief that a man being held on suspected terror charges was able to escape a prison by clinging to the bottom of a food delivery van. The simplest question for the Justice Secretary today is how on earth was this allowed to happen? How is such an escape even possible? And nothing that he has said to the House today so far gets us remotely close to a full answer to this central question. Now, I know he will say when he responds to me that it is early days, that he has ordered the relevant investigations and they must have some time to conclude. But with respect, Madam Deputy Speaker, it gives me no confidence that the Secretary of State has today arrived with a list of very basic questions that frankly he should already know some of the answers to and be able to share with the House today. I note with complete agreement both what he says and your direction, Madam Deputy Speaker, that nothing must be said either in the chamber or indeed anywhere else that may prejudice any future trial or indeed the live operation that is currently underway. But the circumstances and the facts of the escape itself are a separate matter that it is of legitimate and urgent concern to this House and also to the wider public, and that is separate from the nature of any and all charges that will form the basis of future trials or other investigations. And really, the Justice Secretary does need to give much fuller answers to the House today rather than a list of his own questions. And so on the circumstances of the escape itself, can he at least tell the House when he responds how many staff were on duty at Wandsworth Prison yesterday? Is he confident, and can he tell us that all of the relevant searches were done, and where there are failures, offences, perhaps the number of protocols that he is concerned may have been breached. Will his investigations assess the quality of the training and the experience of prison staff at HMP Wandsworth, and will he be bringing in any additional expertise to assist with those matters whilst he is getting on top of the facts himself? In respect of the categorisation of this particular prisoner, Madam Deputy Speaker, why was a suspected terror offender held at a Category B jail whilst on remand, despite many other suspected and indeed convicted terrorists being held in the high security estate? Why was Daniel Khalife moved from Belmarsh to Wandsworth? And can he at least tell us whether a risk assessment before any such move took place was undertaken? That is at least a yes or a no answer. Can you tell us how many similar suspects are in Category B or indeed HMP Wandsworth, and what is the timescale for such an assessment? In relation to the two urgent reviews, may I say to him, with respect, it should be a relatively short exercise to get across the detail and indeed the total number of the current prison population at Wandsworth, and the fact that the Justice Secretary hasn't come to the House with even that small amount of detail, I think I do have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is unacceptable. On the issue of the location of all of those charged with terror offences, can you tell us the total number of the individuals that are being considered in this category as of today across the whole of the prison estate? When will that urgent review of those numbers, and I hope he can share the total number, when will that urgent review take place? And I accept he cannot share any details, but does he know the number of individuals that might be of concern and who may need to be moved to a different location given the events of yesterday? On the broader investigation, Madam Deputy Speaker, I note the Secretary of State has ordered a fuller investigation. Can he say anything today in his response to me in relation to the terms of reference for such an investigation? What does he envisage for the timescale for that longer, fuller investigation? And on the matter of independence, can he give us some reassurance as to whether he will make sure that it won't be a case of him and others who are responsible ultimately for this failure marking their own homework? What consideration is he given to the independence and the identity of who might be carrying out that investigation for him? Madam Deputy Speaker, the developments of the last 24 hours have shown us yet another example of the Conservative mismanagement, which has meant that they are unable to run vast swathes of the public realm, whether it be schools threatening our children's education and their learning, or now with a terror suspect on the loose. Ultimately, one of the main functions of government is to keep its citizens safe. And on his watch, Madam Deputy Speaker, courts are in crisis, probation is in crisis, the CPS is in crisis, and prisons are in crisis. So finally, when will the Secretary of State get a grip?
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I begin by welcoming the Right Honourable Lady to her place. So I will try and address the points that she raises. First of all, it is important to note, and I was pleased to hear her remarks about not wanting to prejudice a future trial. Escape is a criminal offence, so we do need to keep that in mind. She asks about whether there will be inquiries into staff on duty, the quality of training. Absolutely.
I'll get you a roundup of what he says in response to that frankly astonishing catalogue of questions that were asked by Shabana Mahmood. I said to Eleanor, is that her first day in the job? Because she's cramming a heck of a lot into one intervention on a statement about an escaped prisoner. Turns out it is pretty much, I think, her first day in the job. It's quite an achievement. I almost feel sorry for Alex Chalk having to answer that astonishing shopping list of inquiries. But on we go. It's 11:47.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, 3 minutes after 12 is the time. It's like a warm bath, isn't it, some weeks, Mystery Hour? You just sort of sink into it with a sense of calm and serenity. Bit tautologist, that, my apologies. If you're not familiar with this feature, then you're probably going to enjoy it. Not everybody does. I think some people pretend not to, because people are strange. But most of us see it as a welcome relief from the trials and tribulations of the daily diet of news that we consume together. The way it works is this. Someone rings in with a question, you perhaps, kind of funny question, serious question. All it's got to be is a mystery, something that you don't know the answer to, but you must possess a degree of confidence that there must be an answer. And someone else will then ring in with the answer. And from that relatively simple premise, magic often springs. If you've got a question that you want an answer to, you know what to do. And if you make the best contribution of the day, you will win a Mystery Hour board game. I have been so obsessed with writing the new book that I have completely neglected my duties in proofreading the new box of questions and answers for the supplementary pack that we're going to add to Mystery Hour. I will do that this weekend if my colleagues at Big Sky Games are listening. I promise I will do it this weekend. Speaking of Big Sky Games, if you do submit my favourite contribution of this week, you will win a copy of the Mystery Hour board game, a box of the Mystery Hour board game, which you can find at mysteryhour.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply. You can find them at lbc.co.uk, and of course at mysteryhour.co.uk. You can also purchase your own copy of a fun-filled family game. It is 5 minutes after 12. Let's get things underway, shall we? Sedge is in Bognor. Sedge, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's a question.
Carry on, Sedge.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. I've listened to you for years and love what you do.
Oh, that's very kind.
It's been bugging me for ages, but I don't get many Thursdays off. So why do we swing our arms when we walk? And it's something that occurred to me such a long time ago. And then you start watching people and you see that everyone pretty much swings their arms. But I watched recently an interview with the fantastic Evan Peters, and when he played Jeffrey Dahmer, he commented that Jeffrey Dahmer taught himself to walk without swinging his arms.
Why?
Possibly just to be different. I think it was a case of because he didn't have to, because it's, again, I think it's one of these just inherent human things that he decided we don't need to do that, so therefore I shan't.
Okay.
And if we walk with our hands in our pockets, it doesn't slow us down. If we're carrying things, we're not swinging our arms.
No, it must. Well, partly you don't put your hands in your pockets in case you fall over.
I follow that completely because my little boy once did that and gashed his head right open.
Oh, dear. He fell over with his hands in his pockets?
Yeah, he did. And
you'd go down like a tree, wouldn't you? You can't break your fall. And then, you know, it's like a kind of, think of a machine.
Yeah.
It's momentum almost. I'm not going to give myself an answer. Someone will tell us, but I'm just thinking out loud, Sedge. So you've got, I'm miming it now. I look like a right plank.
I don't, you can't really do it without actually sort of walking around without moving your arms.
No.
But I don't feel it impedes your movement. My other thought was that potentially it's a precursor to if we have to run, flight or fight, that we would essentially you pump your arms when you run, and I understand that from a perspective of balance and everything else, but it doesn't really apply when you're walking.
Yes, no, you're right. So why do we do it? It might be a combination of some of the things that we've touched upon, but we will find out. Thank you, Sedge. Are you enjoying your day off? Are you taking advantage of it?
I'm having a wonderful day, and I'm seeing my daughter later, Caitlin, who's moving away to university in Brighton this weekend, so it's going to be emotional.
Of course it is, and good luck to her. Thank you, Sedge. Take care. 7 after 12 is the time. George is in Beckenham. George, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
How much energy does it take for a spider to spin a web, and what would the human equivalent be? Would it be like running around the block?
Oh, okay.
Or would it be like a full
I
day's,
thought I was going to tick you off for asking 2 questions, but actually you've got no.
Your producer I mentioned to say the human equivalent version.
That's how we'll measure the energy. So it's a bit like, what do they always say about? What do they always use double-decker buses for?
To transport people.
Don't be so literal. They like say it's the size of 24 double-decker buses or something like that. So we need
the strength of it.
No, it makes it understandable. So if you're saying it's the size, it takes up the same space as 24 double-decker, but it's as high or whatever.
I keep walking into them everywhere, and they are everywhere.
Well, it can't be that. It can't be that taxing then, can it? It can't be that taxing then, really.
Well, I feel bad because I crush them when I walk past them, and I'm like, oh, have I just ruin this guy's day?
This little spider's life's work, but it's not. So I don't know that we'll get an answer to this, but I do like the question. So any nudge towards a better understanding of How much energy it takes.
Guilty when I walk past.
No, we can't start doing metaphysics, mate, or ethics. I will help you come to a slightly better understanding of how much energy it takes for a spider to spin a web, ideally in the context of comparisons to human exertions. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Michael's in Mitcham. Michael, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
It's why isn't smaller rivers and lakes affected by the tides? Why aren't they tidal?
Why? Well, lakes wouldn't be, would they?
Well, they're a body of water, like the sea, but they're just smaller.
Oh, I see what you mean. Blimey, we've got some weird ones today. I like this. What? I mean, rivers are affected by the tide.
Depends on the part of the river, though. So, as I said to your researcher, the Thames, for example, it's tidal up to a point, and I think that point is about Teddington Lock. And
yes, it is. It is, because Teddington town.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so beyond that, it's normal flow out. But why? Yeah. I go fishing in bodies of water, and they remain.
So really, if we flipped it around, the question would be, why do tides work on some bodies of water? I mean, you're saying, why do tides not work on some bodies of water? I don't mind. It's probably the same answer, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's something to do with the moon and the gravitational pull and all of that.
I think someone once told me that even puddles are tidal, but the movements are so incremental that we can't see them. I don't know if that might be part of the answer, but we need to hear it from someone who knows what they're talking about, don't we, Michael?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that would only be reasonable. All right, nice one. So which bodies of water are tidal? Or indeed, why are some bodies of water not tidal? I like that. Brian's in Lichfield. Brian, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
I was wondering why the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire, their home is in Derbyshire.
Yeah, Chatsworth.
And Lord Carnarvon, his home is in Hampshire. Why are these two people, all of them are the same?
And the Earl of Leicester lives in Norfolk.
This is it, yeah.
Yes.
How come these people don't live where their names are?
Duke of Northumberland does actually live in Alnwick, but he's also got Sion House, of course, out Brentford way. Well, I mean, I think if you go back to like when kings were doffing out earldoms, Brian.
Yes.
I think you just got given the earldom. So there were a certain number of earldoms, and he'd give you the earldom. You didn't have to live there. He'd just make you the Earl of Warwick or the Earl of Leicester.
Yeah, but I would have thought when they were dishing them out, they were given.
They would have come with a castle. You and I would think they'd come with a castle, wouldn't they? Who lives in Carnarvon Castle then? Has it got nothing to do with? Carmarthen or Carnarvon? I'm getting confused now.
Oh no, Carnarvon is where they filmed. Upstairs, downstairs.
Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey, yes.
That one. What? Yeah. So I mean, maybe back in the day they were, and they've just, like the rest of us, they've just migrated around a bit.
And found a bigger bit of land to live on.
Also they owned so much that they lived on their favourite bit. So they might own what we were talking about. The Earl of Warwick might own. I think he's at Warwick Castle. So actually, this isn't helping, is it? Some of them do fit. Some of them do stay in the county or the castle that's got the same name as their title, and some of them don't. So that's all we want to know. Why do some of them live miles away from the place that their title is named after?
Thank you, James.
You're very welcome. Where did your interest in this come from, Brian?
Well, I do a lot of shooting during the season.
Oh, okay. On the fancy estates?
Yeah, on a lot of fancy estates.
Fair enough.
And
have you never asked them?
Well, no, because you don't like to talk to royal family like that, do you?
Well, I do, but probably not wise in the greater scheme of things. I shall try and find out for you, Brian. I like that. So lords and earls, why don't they live where they blooming well should, given their titles and names? 12:13 is the time. We're rattling through them today. We've got swinging arms, spiders, webs, lakes and rivers, earls' names. And Senna's in Bonn in Germany. Senna, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
So I moved to Germany a year ago from the UK, and I didn't realize that I need to carry cash here. And so naturally I always have, it's not as contactless, you need to carry cash here as the UK, at least in my experience. So naturally, I always have a lot of change lying around in my purse. And my question is, so there's another backstory to this question, but when we're paying with using coins at the self-checkout, will the machine realize if we are using coins from a different currency or is that outdated as long as it's of the same dimension as
have you tried?
Honestly, I think I did once because I've got some coins from back when my parents were traveling 30 years ago that are probably no longer valid. And I think it went through.
I think
and that just kind of got me wondering, can I use another currency?
Yes, I think you can. If it's a very similar weight and dimension, then you're laughing.
Oh, okay. Well, not that we can benefit too much from it because it's going to be just coins.
Well, it's also, I imagine it's fraud as well. I mean, if you're doing it consciously, you can't. But I'm pretty sure that,
I won't.
Because there was it the €1 coin? When there was a big difference between a euro and a pound. Well, that wouldn't be right, would it? Because a euro's much thinner than a pound. I tell you what I did the other day. I'm going to go peak Alan Partridge now, but I didn't have a quid for the supermarket trolley, Senna, and I used a 20p.
Oh. That's interesting.
Thank you. I think, I think it's not very interesting, is it, Senna, really?
Well, to be honest, once a driving instructor gave me...
Yeah, go on.
He gave me a keyring and he said you can use this for the trolley. So I think maybe there's a difference between what we can use for a trolley and
but we want on an electronic payment machine, can you use coins that are not, dodgy foreign coins?
Yeah, not that I'll ever do it, I promise.
No, I know, absolutely. You're clearly very honest. That goes without saying. But I like it. I mean, I presume it's all about weight and dimensions, and there must be, by the law of averages, there must be some coincidental coincidings. All coincidings are coincidental, where one coin coincides with another, despite being worth considerably more or less, or both. Or, no, it can't. What? 12.6. I shouldn't have said the bit about the supermarket trolley, shouldn't I? That made me sound quite a lot like Alan Partridge. It's too late now.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
19 minutes after 12 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think we might have to be careful with Senna's question because we could be kind of encouraging criminality, couldn't we? So don't give me any examples of very, very low-valued very, very low-value foreign coins that have got roughly the same dimension and weight of British coins that you could therefore use. It was always video games when we were kids. Do you remember? Was it pesetas? I don't know why no one else is going to remember, but there was one coin that you could bring back from your holidays, and it wasn't worth a tiny fraction of what the English coin was worth, but it'd be the 10p's, wouldn't it, back in the day when we were playing a lot of video games. And it was a foreign coin that was worth about 5p or 4 or 5p. And it would do the job of a 10p coin in a British coin-op machine, and that's really what Senna's question is about. Does that still happen, or if not, how do they prevent it from happening? It is 20 after 12. I really like the question about why lords and earls and the rest of it don't live in the places that their titles are from, that are named after. You're sending me a heck of a lot of stuff actually on this. I worry slightly that you're so interested in the aristocracy. We don't really approve of their existence on this programme. I mean, not their human existence, that's absolutely fine, carry on breathing, but the existence of titles and deference and forelock tugging. It's a lonely battle though. Lakes and rivers, which ones have tides and which ones don't in terms of bodies and water, and why? How much energy does it take for a spider to spin a web? But we needed explaining in human terms. So a spider spinning one web is like writing 2 books or something like that. And why do we swing our arms when we walk? If you can answer any of those, you're laughing. Stuart's in Islington. Stuart, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
Right, so you've got the Scottish accent.
Aye.
You have the English accent.
Yes.
Okay, you have a border.
You do.
Is there an accent that's in between English and Scottish? Or once
Geordie.
you get over the border...
Geordie.
But it's not really Scottish, though, is it?
Well, it's way I man. It's more Scottish than Cockney.
Yeah,
so,
you can tell an English accent from a Scottish accent.
Yes.
And it doesn't obviously just change when you get to the border, does it?
So Berwick-upon-Tweed or thereabouts would be the accent we're looking for, wouldn't it? So sort of, or just on the other side of the Scottish border, because presumably they would sound the same as each other.
Yeah. So you've got so the Scottish side of the border will sound Scottish, and the English side of the border sounds English. But when you're on, is there people that live on the border that have got a mixture of accents?
Well, it seems unlikely.
But why does it change?
Well, there must be an incremental change.
There must be a point where it changes. Yeah, there must be.
But there can't be a point where it, like, literally you cross a line and the accents the accents change.
That's what I'm saying.
No, but it can't.
So, but obviously, but you hear someone and they're quite obviously English, and you hear someone who's quite obviously Scottish.
Yeah.
Is there an accent where the two are combined?
It's a very good question, but I thought Geordie was the answer to the question, but it's not. It's not going to be that, is it? Because Newcastle's quite far south of Berwick-upon-Tweed. So as you sort of get past Alnwick, which we mentioned a moment ago in the context of the Duke of Northumberland, and then I don't know, where does Scotland actually kick in? Is it Reston or Eyemouth?
Even when you look at Wales and England, again, the Welsh accent, the English accent.
Well, then you'd be looking at a Herefordshire accent, wouldn't you? Just around Hay-on-Wye, that neck of the woods, and then what's on the other side?
You're very good with geography. I haven't got a clue where
absolutely,
you're talking about.
I'm appalling at geography, but I'm touring with the new book, bizarrely. So I actually have been looking at rail routes and stuff like that, and I know, and I love that East Coast. If you ever get the chance, you must take that train up the East Coast from London to Edinburgh, and you go through Berwick-upon-Tweed. It's absolutely beautiful. The second half of it is absolutely glorious. But yeah, I've never yet. So is there a graph of accents where they gradually transform from English to Scottish? Well, I like that. I don't know that we'll get an answer, but you sort of.
It's just one of those things that are sort of sit down. It's one of those nights when you just sit and you've been drinking and you're like,
yeah. You feel there should be. Well, we need someone with a very typical strong Berwick-upon-Tweed accent to ring in, even whether they know the answer or not. Then you and I can listen to it. Carlisle, probably. Colin in Hastings said Carlisle might do the job even better, and then you and me can decide whether or not we think that sounds like a mixture of English and Scottish, because they might not even know. Right, you're on. Yeah, I like that. Accents. Okay. Thank you, Stuart. Mind how you go. It is 24 minutes after 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Accents and borders, I'll write that one down. I have to jot something down so I can remember what the question was. 10 franc coin back in the day was valued at about £1, and it was the same size as a 10p coin, says Barry, on the M3. That wouldn't have helped me. And what would you have done? 10, it can't be that, because we did. I mean, where would you use that? You'd use £1. No, I don't see how that helps. Anyway, I just digressing. Andy's in Tunbridge. Andy, question or answer?
Morning, afternoon, James.
Hello, mate. What have you got?
Hello. I've got an answer to you about your rivers and seas question.
Carry on.
So, the question is bound obviously around gravity, and gravity. There's three main components to where that gravitational force comes from: the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun.
Yeah.
Now, the primary gravitational force on any body of water comes from the Earth, and that is because there is immediate proximity.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the oceans, because it's already found a level, the primary gravitational force has already kind of been settled.
Right.
So therefore, the secondary effect of the Moon and the Sun is then dominating that additional movement of those oceans.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to lakes, because they are much smaller bodies of water, the same kind of effect is going on, but it's almost imperceptible.
Yeah.
The difference, so far, with rivers is because they haven't met their settled state as a result of reaching a point where the water becomes level. So they're still acting under the primary gravitational force of the Earth. So what the river is trying to do, because it's like your rain falls generally on higher ground and starts to work its way down on land, to find its own level. So the dominant gravitational force is driven by its desire to get to a point where the water settles.
So Teddington is the point at which the force of the water coming downstream meets the water potentially coming upstream, and that's where the tides stop affecting the river.
Yes. So within the tidal Thames, the bed level of the Thames is essentially lower than sea level, up to the point where it meets a point on the land where the water level is higher than the sea level. So that's why the tide egresses into the Thames up to Teddington Lock. And then it's met by the gravitational force of the rainwater that is coming from the land and finding its way to meet that flat surface, or predominantly flat surface at the sea. But the effect of the moon and sun is so minimal on the river because of the dominance of it actually trying to find its way to a lower point. And so obviously, because you've got a cubic meter of water weighs a metric ton, it will, because of that mass, it's trying to drive itself downhill, and obviously that's why.
No, I got it. So everything has got, even a puddle would have a tide, but it would just be too tiny for you to see.
Yeah, because gravity is actually a fairly weak force anyway.
Of course. No, I like it. Qualifications?
Environment Agency, rivers and seas, is kind of things that we do, and and
do nicely.
environmental qualifications.
And Mystery Our Legend, of course. Andy, thank you.
you.
No, thank you.
Yes.
That's a lovely one. We can take that off. Round of applause for Andy, please. Well done. Sarah's in Worcester Park. Sarah, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Hi.
Hello.
Yes, it's about fizzy water.
Okay.
So last year I put some fizzy water in a bottle of mine, and I didn't overfill it because I thought the bubbles might make it expand.
Yes.
And I took it out with me, and it exploded. The top blew off.
Wow.
And my
Where were you at the time?
Well, actually, I was actually at the airport, which was really, really embarrassing, and I made this poor lady jump out of her skin.
I bet you did. Yeah.
Yeah. But my question is, why doesn't that happen when you buy shop-bought, ready-packed fizzy water?
Well, where did the fizzy water come from that you poured into the bottle?
From my soda stream.
Yes. So you had you'd put more gas in it.
So I just made my own little bottle of fizzy water.
But you didn't take the soda stream bottle to the airport. You poured it into a different bottle.
just a regular plastic bottle.
Yeah. So what you did was put more gas in your fizzy water than you would get in a shop-bought drink.
Oh, I don't think so.
No, you definitely did.
I definitely don't think I did.
Definitely did.
No.
Definitely. There's no other, but I've eliminated it. I have eliminated all other possibilities, and what I am left with, however unlikely, must be the truth.
I think there must be another explanation that is out there,
what
James.
Do you think it is? That's better than mine. What have you got?
Hello?
Hello? I'm waiting for your explanation that's better than mine.
No, I don't have an explanation. That's why I'm on.
I know, and I think you're being quite dismissive of my explanation. It must. I mean, what else could it possibly be?
No, because if you have a soda stream, but there's different levels of amounts of gas you can put in it depending on how many times you press down on the little button.
I know. And on the new ones, you don't get the clicky noise that you used to get on the old ones. Do you have one back in the day, or have you only got a modern one?
I had one back in the day, but my one now is one with pink cylinders.
But you remember when back in the day you hold it down and at some point it went and that meant it was...
Yes.
You don't have that now. It's like limitless.
Yeah, I only usually press twice, though.
Yeah, but I reckon on that day, I reckon you overfizzed it. I'm not going to take a round of applause because you're being, frankly, quite dismissive of my attempts to answer your question. But I can't, for the life of me, imagine what else it would be. And it actually exploded. The top flew off.
The top flew off, and it made a really loud noise, and it was quite shocking.
It would be, wouldn't it? Right, yes. You're on. Why did Sarah's top blow off? Is the question from her bottle with the water in that she had overfizzed. It's 12:31. Amelia Cox has the headline.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It It is 12:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Sheila with you shortly, of course. And at 1 p.m, she will be joined by the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, taking your calls. Call from 1 to get your questions in about the state of the NHS and the coordinated strike action now between junior doctors and consultants. And then stay with LBC, because at 4 p.m, Tom Swarbrick will be joined by Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson to take your calls. Join Tom as he questions her about who's responsible for the school concrete crisis. All that and more coming up later today on LBC. Just to clarify, to stop you from submitting your applications to Idiot's Corner by text, government ministers are equally welcome. If not more so, actually, because they've actually got their hands on the lever of power to appear on any of these programmes. But Wes Streeting and Bridget Phillipson appearing today simply because they accepted the invitations. 12:35 is the time. Back to Mystery Hour. John's in Horsham. John, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Go on.
Right, OK. So I was watching the late, great Ray Liotta the other day in a fantastic film. I know, it's such a sad, so sad it is. It was him and Joe Pesci, and Joe Pesci fires a gun with a silencer, and of course you hear that. Now I don't know if that's how it sounds in real life, but I want to know how a silencer works, because when you think of the dynamics of a gun, the hammer hits the back of the bullet, which is at the back of the gun. So surely the explosion should be heard there.
No. Bizarrely,
go on. You are the Obi-Wan of the radio.
I know this one. I don't know whether we've had it before or whether I have inquired into it for similar reasons to you. I watched Equalizer 3 the other day with Denzel Washington in it, and that has a lot
I'm looking forward to watching that.
It's a brilliant film, a lot of silencer action. But it's got links to the question that Sarah asked about the top blowing off her bottle, actually, because what makes the noise when the top blows off a bottle or a champagne cork opens is obviously the gas that is being released. And what a silence...
that's what reloads a self-loading gun, doesn't it? The gas.
Yes, but that's different gas. That's different gas. This is the gas that is propelling the bullet up the barrel. So when, the gas that is released upon ignition, and then it shoots out the end of the barrel and makes a massive noise. But if you think of a silencer is thicker than a barrel. So it's got a broader diameter. You see what I mean? So it does. You screw it on the end, and it's wider than the barrel, and that is full of, I think, and this I might get wrong, but I think the word is baffle. I think it's full of baffle, and the barrel of the silencer is perforated, so it's got a lot of holes in it, and the baffle absorbs the gas. So the gas that's making its way up the barrel moves into the second barrel, i.e. the silencer, and the gas dissipates into the wadding or the baffle that is behind the holes in the silencer, so that by the time the bullet gets to the end of the silencer, the amount of gas that is going to pop out the end is significantly reduced. Ergo, you don't get a big bang, you get a little fut.
I mean, I do wonder if sometimes it's just the movies, but do they really even sound like that when they go off in real life?
I don't think they're as effective as they're described or portrayed in movies, but they are effective.
Well, I'd tell you what, you've answered funny enough, as you said that about silencers, I started looking up silencers, and yes, they do all seem to have perforated holes around.
Has it got the name? Is it baffle? Is it called baffle? Can you see baffle there?
Google's just changed it to waffle.
Don't. Can we see? Don't worry. Is it what? It's me. That I do the waffle. You do the baffle. Mystery Hour, in fact, is the marriage of baffle.
Yeah,
is it baffle?
There is a word there. There is a word about baffles. I'd have to open up that one.
No, that's it. Baffle is the stuff behind the holes. Waffle and baffle.
Well, there you
baffle
go.
And what? There you go. Round of applause for me. Thank you, John.
You've done exactly what you said, which is educate me.
Well, qualifications. I watch a lot of action movies, and I must have looked it up at some point in the past, or it's come up on the programme. But it's brilliant that you looked it up like that, because then you can actually confirm that I've gone definitive. Thank you, John. Dharmendra is in Watford. Dharmendra, question or answer?
Hello. Answer, James.
Carry on.
James, so I work for EPOS company who supply retail EPOS in the retail shops. And we, the till system that in the shops, like self-checkouts. And,
yes, What are they called? EPOS?
We call it EPOS system. It's like a retail EPOS, like a POS system.
Okay.
The point of sale.
Point of sale. So electronic point of sale.
Electronic point of sale.
Yeah, we got there in the end. There we go. Carry on.
Okay. So, sorry, a bit nervous. My heart is pumping. First time I'm talking to you. So.
Oh, don't worry.
Long time listener, though.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we work with these machines, and we have a couple of companies who supply this. Like a self-checkout machine in the market, and we integrate those machines. We have our own software, and we work with those companies to integrate this machine. And what happens is this machine has a very like a Bank of England authorized standard to follow. And what happens is these machines are very clever in terms the design is very clever. Even if it's the same weight, but if it's a fake coin, this machine can recognize this fake coins. There is a lot of pound coins or normal coins in the market, they are fake, even though it looks exactly the same as the normal pound coin.
Yeah, but a fake, but yeah, go on, carry on.
But the material, or I don't know exactly later what technical terms they use or what technical analysis they use on the coin, but they use some kind of technology inside to recognize if it's not just a
So
weight.
you never, ever, when you did, I don't suppose you empty the machines, but if you did...
Yeah.
You would never find...
You never find any fake coins inside.
There's not a fake coin, a real coin from a different country.
No, it will not take that either, because those ones are configured with the currency of the country. So let's say we have a machine in the UK, it will be configured with the pound configuration. If it's in Europe, it will be configured with the euro coins and euro.
So there's no crossover whatsoever?
Whatsoever, because it has to go through the standard, and then only it will work. It will reject every single coin, also the notes as well. Even if it's a fake note, it will check the notes, it will throw it out as well. It will not take the note in the machine.
So are there cameras in there now? Have they got cameras?
It's not a camera. It's just, I think, what we've been told, because these companies are specialized in these machines.
Yes.
And they use Bank of England standard to recognize the fake coins and fake notes.
Fair enough.
In the machine. So they throw these coins out automatically. It will not take those coins in the machine itself. And as I said, it is country specific anyway, so you can't use euro in the UK.
It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. You can't do it. And whereas back in the olden days when things were being done by simpler engineering...
Yeah, just check it. Just looking at it. I mean, by looking at it, I have seen it by my hand, by my eyes. What happens is there's a fake coins in my hand and a real coin. When you look at it, it's exactly the same. There is literally, you can't even the design.
But the machine can. The technology can do what the human can't do.
Exactly, and it's designed for that purpose, because nobody can. Otherwise, it's going to be everywhere.
Are there any secret codes?
Unfortunately, I'm not aware of it, but maybe.
I thought you were about to tell me then. Yes, just type in this.
I'd be a millionaire otherwise.
You would be. This is true. And probably in jail, briefly, depending on which one they sent you to. Dharmender, take care, mate. A round of applause for Dharmender, please. Look at that.
Thank you, James. Thank you. You made my day. Thank you,
you made mine as well. Thank you, mate. Stay safe. 12:42 is the time. John's in Dulwich. John, question or answer? John?
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Well, hello indeed. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yes.
When I was growing up, it was a constant riff from my grandparents and my mother that if I didn't get a good night's sleep, I'd get bags or shadows under my eyes.
Yes.
Is it true? And if so, why?
Yes, I think it must be true, because I've seen it on my own face. But we want to know what's causing it. I've got the word lymph something in my head. No, it's no use at all. I went to Dulwich for the first time this week, John.
It's delightful.
It's a really lovely part of the town, isn't it? Really lovely part. I was a bit silly because for some reason in my head I got Greenwich mixed up with Dulwich. You can see why. I mean, they sound quite similar. So I had a splendid time with Mick Heron at Dulwich College as an event arranged by the Dulwich Bookshop. But I only realised I'd made a mistake when I looked up how do I get a boat to Dulwich, and realised that I'd got it mixed up with Greenwich. But luckily I did that. I did that in good time to realise it would have been, if I'd been banking on going by boat, it could have all been a bit embarrassing. Sorry, I know this isn't what you rang up for. Why is the Dulwich Picture Gallery so famous? Because I went a little early hoping to pop into the Dulwich Picture Gallery, knowing that it is a famous picture gallery, but it shut at 5 and I got there at 5:15 and I didn't have an event till 7, so I just sort of wandered around like a bit of a nomad. What's in it? Why is it? Why was I aware of it as being a place worth visiting?
It was founded by a chap called John Soane.
It's the Sir John Soane. Yeah, got it. No, that's why. So because I know the Sir John Soane Museum in Lincoln's Inn Field, and he's got the place out in Ealing as well, which was like his country house. And so that is why I knew. That's a brilliant. I'll give John a round of applause. Beautifully done, John. You solved one of my mysteries. I don't think that's ever happened on Mystery App. If it's exactly because I know quite a lot about Sir John Soane that I would have been keen to go to the Dulwich Picture Gallery. I'll try and get your answer in return about bags under the eyes. And if anyone hasn't been to Dulwich, lovely part of the world. Lovely part of the world. It's coming up to 1:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dulwich College, which was attended, of course, by that unremovable skid mark on the underpants of British politics, but also Raymond Chandler went there, I think possibly at the same time as P.G. Wodehouse, which for literature fans is a bit of a kind of charming coincidence, isn't it? The time now is 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we need a lot of answers before 1 o'clock. Why do we swing our arms when we walk? How much energy does it take for a spider to spin a web in human terms? Why do all the earls and lords not live in the place that their titles are named after? Done that. Is there a point at which the English accent turns into the Scottish accent, or the Scottish accent turns into the English accent? Why, when Sarah Chance preferred water, I didn't ask what type of bottle it was, so that may be it, but I don't see why it would be. Anyway, why, when she put her SodaStream water in a different bottle, did the top blow off at the airport? And I've done the silencers one. I did that quite well. And why do our eyes go baggy? Baggy eyes. Jill's in Southend. Jill, question or answer?
It's a question, please.
There's 2 calls from Southend today. Carry on.
No. Yes, it's a question about pigeons.
Oh, I know quite a lot about pigeons. Carry on.
Oh,
yes.
I know then. Well,
yes.
You might know this.
I do, mate. Well.
It's why do pigeons congregate on some roofs and not on others? So you'll see them, they'll all be on one side of, say, a semi-detached property, but not gravitate to the other side.
Oh.
And it's quite often older people's properties, I've noticed. So I thought it could be heat rising or something like that, but it happens in the summer too. So I just wondered,
how have you established the age of the residents of the home upon which the pigeons appear more likely to roost?
Well, I may have that wrong. That is
I'm just wondering what your research is, because I think you're right.
I live in a bungalow. I live in a bungalow, and I live in probably a predominantly older area.
Okay.
But it still doesn't explain why they.
I know this.
They sit on.
No, you're right. It is. They are generally older.
Some of the others.
The homes, and the reason is, Jill.
Right. Yeah.
that pigeons, they actually do like listening to human voices.
Really?
Yes. So what you find is that older people have their radios turned up quite high, and therefore the pigeons will settle on the home where the radio is on higher, and that is the answer to your question.
Right. Okay.
Or televisions,
so
or television, because the older people are likely to be a bit harder of hearing.
Slightly hard of hearing.
Hard of hearing.
So
so they turn the volume up, and that is why the pigeons are sitting on the houses of the...
I'm going to have to go and listen at their doors now.
Well, you will notice they've probably got me on, actually, I hope. But whatever you do, don't tell them to turn it down.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't know if this is true, Jill. I don't think I can take a round of applause for this one. Can I, really? It sounds unlikely.
Well, it could be, but I'm sure there are younger people in the mix here.
There must be.
Perhaps they've got their sort of boom boxes on.
Could be that, yeah. It could be. I shall put it. How do pigeons choose what houses to sit on?
Yes. Thank you. It's been plaguing me a long time.
It's plaguing me now, Jill. I tell you what, if it's the radios, I'll give you the money myself. Okay, well, how long have we got? We've only got 7 minutes. Come on, for Jill, please. Why? She's got a good point. Where pigeons only settle on half a house, half a building. Why? What is it? Is it the sun? Where they're facing one way or another? Why are they doing it? If it's the radios, I'll eat my hat. Mikey's in London Thorpe in Lincolnshire. Mikey, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Okay, is it the pigeons?
It's not, unfortunately. I wish it was.
Go on then. What have you got?
So it's in regards to the and the accent change.
Yes.
So I lived in Berwick upon about 18 months, and the accent there, it's genuinely like a hybrid between like a Geordie accent and the accent in Edinburgh, which is like the sort of the slightly posh,
the refined Scottish accent, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. So their accent is a full hybrid between the two of those. If you then said to someone from Berwick that their accent was Scottish or Geordie, they would not like that very much. So
because they know they're conscious of it. And I think that Carlisle, where you haven't lived, judging from my inbox, Carlisle may be an even better example of what you're describing.
Yeah, so I'd say it's around about the same sort of thing from there, because it's kind of like the further north you get, the stronger the accent will get. So when you are on the line of Berwick, they have their own unique accent, and then... So it does.
So I think So what Brian needs to do? No, it wasn't Brian that asked the question. Who was it? It was Stuart. Needs to get himself up. He needs to get himself up there. Go on that train journey I told him about, and
absolutely,
and check out Berwick upon Tweed and Carlisle. I wonder. We don't know what the Welsh equivalent might be. I'm thinking around Goodrich Castle, that neck of the woods, but the Welsh borders, literally where all the castles are. You probably get a similar. Yeah. But of course, what you remind us of is the gradations of accents you have as you move into Scotland, and by the time you get into the Highlands, you've got a much more thick accent than you've got in Edinburgh, for example, and Glasgow. Comparing Glasgow to Edinburgh are very different as well. I like this. Thank you. A round of applause for Mikey. Nicely done. Quick clarification: Sir John Soane designed the gallery for the founders of the museum, the gallery in Dulwich. Rosemary's been in touch, who volunteers at the Dulwich Picture Gallery. It was actually the founders Noel Desainfants and Francis Bourgeois who put together the old master collection for the King of Poland, who was living in Dulwich, having been deposed. And they were left with the collection on their hands, subsequently housed in the Soane building, the first purpose-built public art gallery. Rosemary, I know it's a must visit, but you shut at 5 and I got there at 5 past. I took a punt that it would be open until 6. Keith's in Glasgow. Keith, question or answer?
Hello, James. Nice to talk to you. It's a half an answer, I'm afraid.
I'll take that. That's better than none. It's better than none.
That's better than none. A couple of weeks ago, you interviewed... what's his name now? It's just dropped out of my head.
Don't worry. What was he?
Chris Bryant.
Yes, that's
Chris
right.
Bryant,
yeah.
The Labour guy.
Yeah.
Pushing his book.
He's a minister now.
Conduct.
They've promoted him. Well, I tell you what, you appear on this programme and you get promoted a fortnight later.
Oh, well, I'll look forward to that. I'll ring you back in a fortnight.
Carry on.
Anyway, his book, Code of Conduct, and I accidentally went onto the main audiobook site and bought the wrong book.
Oh.
Called Entitled.
Right.
And it's a fascinating book, if not a little bit difficult.
Go on.
And it details all the nobility from sort of the Norman conquest to the present day.
Gosh.
And the answer to the main answer to your question is all of these entitles have about half a dozen different titles. So he might be the Duke of Norfolk living in Leicester, but he's also going to be half a dozen other titles.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't
because they've been collecting them like top trumps or Pokemons, and so
that's right.
So there's no real requirement. So they go by the name of the biggest, which would be the Earl of Watson, but they might also be the Duke of so and so.
That's right. Because as they die, some of them get passed on.
That's
depending
correct.
What kind of period
you
it is.
Look at when the late Queen passed away, they were divvying them up like nobody's business, weren't they? Among all her various progeny. I like that. So why is it only half an answer? Because it won't actually account for every single one of them.
Because I don't know the full story, because I read the book, but I can't remember what it said.
And did you get around to getting Chris Bryant's book, or were you too engrossed by the one you bought by accident?
I did listen to the one I bought by accident, and I haven't listened to the new one. I did and good news for you.
Yes.
I pre-ordered yours for the 2nd of November.
What, on the audio book?
That we can't mention, the website we can't mention.
No, you can if you want, but is it the audio book that you've ordered?
Audible.com.
Audible.com, because I am literally going from here today to the studio to record the second third. So you'll be able. I wish there was some way I could slip in a Keith, but I can't.
I did come to a book signing in Glasgow last year.
Oh, that was an enjoyable one.
Yeah, and you couldn't sign my audiobook. I don't know how we're going to do that, James.
No, we must find a way. I suppose I could put a thumbprint on your tablet or something like that. Keith, thank you. Big round of applause. It's a good answer, that. We liked it a lot. Thank you, Keith. I think I'm back in Glasgow soon, actually, or certainly nearby. Squeeze in Suzanne, who's in Northwich. Suzanne, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
It's a geeky answer. It's the spider's webs.
Yes. How much energy?
A clarification. There isn't, because not all spiders make webs.
But that's pedantic. The ones that do, I'm asking about, obviously.
Yeah, but they all make different ones.
Yeah, so
you
you
have
can't
something like a cellar spider.
Yeah.
Will make a cottony web in the corner of the room.
Correct.
A garden spider will use a child-drawn spider.
Well,
web,
any spider at all.
amino
Pick a
acid.
spider. Go on, pick a spider. Any spider.
Pick a spider.
Yeah, go on, pick a spider.
I'll go for a funnel web.
And how much energy does it take?
trapdoor.
How much does it for a funnel web to spin a spider web?
Because they're quite big, it takes about 30% of their body energy.
Flipping heck.
Because they don't. Oh God, this is really going geeky. Something like a garden spider will eat it. Will eat its web and move it.
And then regurgitate.
A funnel web. Yes, they use the amino acids and the proteins to remake their webs. A funnel web.
So when you say 30% of the thing, would that would be like me being on the rowing machine for so long that I used 30% of my body weight? Or...
No, your energy.
What
depends what it's eaten. It depends. It depends on the size of the spider.
So I know, but we're just focusing on one spider.
One spider.
One funnel web spider.
Web,
so it's 30% of the last meal I ate, or it's 30%. What is it? 30%.
30% of the energy that's in it.
But how much
so whatever energy is in it. I'm thinking if you've eaten 1,000 calories, it's like 300 calories.
Oh, okay. So a third of the available calories.
Available calories, yeah.
All right. Qualifications?
I did spiders' webs for my dissertation.
What was it titled?
Spiders. Tensile strengths of spiders' webs.
Page turner, that one. That's a page turner, isn't it, Suzanne?
It's boring. I'm a geek.
Well, you're not a geek. Stop saying that. You're an expert. Have a round of applause and have a board game as well, because that was actually my favourite contribution of the day.
Maybe that's why, when you see a horrible spider, well, I think horrible anyway, a spider in the crevice of your ceiling for 4 days, and then you come home from work one day and it's gone.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just resting.
Knackered.
After some webbing.
Yeah, seriously, after a hardcore webbing session.
They just sit there, don't they, for days and nights.
That's exactly what it is, unless it's dead, of course.
No.
If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back. Do you not like spiders?
When they're thin and spindly, I'm fine, but there was
big fat ones.
There was one so horrible in my flat recently. Yeah. I got my downstairs neighbour's 10-year-old child to get rid of it for me.
Fantastic. Did you slip him a shilling?
It was a little girl, actually. She was marvellous. She was marvellous, yeah.
If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also rewind live radio, all LBC shows to catch up on, as well as all the latest news from LBC. So do rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4, joined, remember, by Bridget Phillipson. But first it's time for Sheila Fogarty, joined, of course, by Wes Streeting.
James O'Brien on LBC.